Google is one of the most powerful tools in the world today. In fact, it's safe to say that Google is how the internet was built. We use Google for everything from research papers to dating profiles. Google has been so prevalent in our everyday lives that we've taken it for granted. But have you ever wondered who created Google? It turns out that the creator of Google was just a normal dude like you and me who had a brilliant idea. In this video, I'll be looking at the origins of Google and how two students built the internet's brain. So what really happened? Well, the story of Google begins with two students named Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Both of these guys were extremely smart. Larry graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in computer engineering and a minor in computer science, while Serge graduated from the University of Maryland with a bachelor's in computer science. He also earned a master's degree in computer science from Stanford. Although both Larry and Serge were geniuses, they couldn't find any success. Like many other people, they were trying to make a name for themselves in the tech world. They didn't know it at the time, but their opportunity would come when they met each other. The two first met when Sergey applied to join Larry's team at a company called Sun. Back in 1995, Sun Microsystems was one of the biggest companies in the world. They dominated the desktop computing space. Basically, if you used a computer back then, it was probably a Sun workstation. When Sergey applied to Larry's team, his application went through multiple rounds before finally making it to Larry's desk. At the time, Larry was managing a team of 40 engineers, so he didn't want to waste time going through dozens of applications every day. That's why he asked his assistant to perform an initial screening. As soon as Larry saw Sergey's resume, he knew that he was special, so he pushed his assistant to hire Sergey as fast as possible. After he was hired, Larry handed Sergey a project that was way above his pay grade. He wanted Sergey to help him with a large project that involved reorganizing Sun's entire code base. Larry already knew that Sergey was the right man for the job. Not only did Sergey possess amazing coding skills, but he was also great at solving problems. By the end of the project, Sergey was not only the lead developer, but he was also Larry's best friend. But as you might have guessed, Sun's management wasn't too fond of hiring fresh graduates, so they often put restrictions on Larry when it came to handing out projects. This meant that Larry and Sergey were unable to work on some of their best ideas, and that's when they decided to move on. In the spring of 1996, Larry and Sergey began discussing the possibility of starting a company together. Now that they were friends, they trusted each other's abilities and they had a shared passion for solving complex problems, so it seemed like a no-brainer to start a company together. For the first couple of months, the two worked on coming up with the perfect product. They looked into the market and realized that there was a huge demand for better search engines. At the time, the most popular search engine was Ask Jeeves, but it was far from perfect. It was extremely slow and it didn't understand context. Most of the results were completely irrelevant to the search term. In fact, a lot of people would turn to online directories to find relevant websites. The problem was that these directories were extremely hard to update. If something changed or if a new website popped up, it would take weeks for the directory to get updated. But if these directories were able to keep up with the latest trends, they would be extremely powerful. That's because the average person wouldn't know where to look for certain websites. And that's where search engines came into play. Search engines could automatically go through all the websites on the internet and categorize them based on relevance. So instead of having to manually sift through dozens of websites, users could simply type in a keyword and boom, they would get a list of relevant websites. Although this idea was brilliant, it was also incredibly hard to execute. There was so much data to go through. Plus, the infrastructure didn't exist to support such a system. Nonetheless, Larry and Sergey were determined to make this a reality. They spent the next year developing an algorithm that could rank websites based on relevance. Their algorithm was like nothing the world had ever seen. Instead of relying on human editors, Larry and Sergey developed a system that allowed crawlers to rank websites based on popularity. This way, the most relevant information would always float to the top. Now that they had the perfect algorithm, Larry and Sergey needed to develop the infrastructure to support it. Back in the 90s, Google wasn't Google. In fact, it was known as... This was because the search engine went through so many iterations before finally being renamed to Google. Anyway, Backroom's infrastructure was built by Stanford's chief information officer. This guy was a computer genius. He had actually invented the world's first web server, so he was more than capable of handling Larry and Sergey's requests. With the help of this guru, Backrub was finally able to index the entire internet. Now that they had the world's most powerful search engine, Larry and Sergey needed a name. As you might have guessed, the word Google isn't some fancy Latin word that means search. In fact, it comes from a comical mispronunciation of the word Google. A Google is the mathematical term for 1 followed by 100 zeros. Just like the word Google, a Google represents infinite amounts of data. Keep in mind that Google wasn't the only search engine working towards infinite indexing. There were plenty of other competitors in the game. Yahoo, for example, had over 50 million unique visitors per month. Compared to this, Google only had around 10,000 unique visitors per month. But the quality of Google's results was far superior. This made Google the go-to source for results. As Google started gaining traction, Larry and Sergey knew that they needed to scale. And that's when they reached out to Sun for help. Sun offered to invest $100,000 into Backrub in exchange for 5% ownership. And Larry and Sergey happily agreed. After getting the investment, Larry and Sergey set out to build the ultimate team. They began luring top talent away from Yahoo and other competitors. Within no time, they had assembled a team of 20 engineers. This marked the official launch of Google as a company. But there was still one major issue. Google was mostly used by researchers, which is why Larry and Sergey needed to expand beyond research. They knew that they could never achieve mainstream success unless they got the common people on board. The biggest challenge here was that the average user was uninterested in sifting through hundreds of blue links. So Larry and Sergey needed a way to make Google easier to use. This is when they introduced the world to Google News and These products were pretty different from their search engine, but they all operated on the same principles. Sergey and Larry simply applied their ranking algorithms to news articles and email, and this resulted in a much more user-friendly experience. As you can see, the news showed relevant stories based on your interests, and the inbox sorted emails based on importance. After launching these new products, Google's user count exploded to over 1 million. All of a sudden, everyone was talking about Google. Larry and Sergey knew that they had entered the big leagues in that S when they decided, go for an IPO. On August 19, 2004, Google went public. The IPO price was set at $85 per share, and investors were able to buy in at this price. This gave Google a market cap of nearly $43 billion. At the time, this was the largest IPO since the launch of Amazon. With all this money flowing in, Google went on a shopping spree. Over the next few years, they purchased over 40 companies, but the majority of these purchases were small companies that specialized in different areas of search. For example, there was a company called Daija News that specialized in news group search. Then there was another company called Keen, which specialized in search for shopping and local businesses. By acquiring these companies, Google was able to grow their market share exponentially. As we've covered, Google literally owns the internet. They have their fingers in every bar, whether it be search, news, maps, email, photos, cloud storage, or software. Nowadays, Google makes most of their money through advertising. But that's a story for another day. In the meantime, do you use Google every day? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you want to see more videos like this. But until then, I'll see you guys on the next one.